All right. Is that better? All right. Sometimes it takes time to really sink in. That there are things that happen in life that mark us. Things that can be astounding, can be incredible, can be joyous or sad or traumatic. Definitive moments in our lives that when they happen are incredible and outstanding in our lives in the moment they happen, and we may recognize that in the moment, but even so, the effect, the ripple effect of that event in our life can ripple the further away we get from that moment, and that it can take time to fully realize the importance of that moment. Examples. A wedding day. The birth of a child. Graduation. Retirement. Landing a new job. A diagnosis. And these are all life transitional moments. And often in these moments, there's the moment itself, all the things we normally, as I said, each of those events, there's like with a wedding or the birth of a child, you see either a church or a wedding venue or a hospital or whatever, but that can be common to all of our experiences. But often it's more than just the hospital, the wedding venue, or whatever. It's the interactions that happen with the people at that time. Maybe something someone said to you that creates that ripple effect. That when we're in the moment, we're spellbound, we're astounded by the magnitude of the entire event and its impact upon us. But as that event unfolds in our life, there's the smaller details that initially in that moment or the next day or for the next week kind of escapes the attention because you're so astounded by how incredible the entire experience was. But it isn't until months or even years down the road that the words of somebody in that moment or something that happened that seemed trivial or unnoticed in the moment was actually an incredible coincidence that happened in that moment. That the ripple effect, the impact, carries on down through the years. And it doesn't have to be these life stage moments either. A key moment for me, kind of a mountaintop, astounding moment for me that's personal, was the first time I cried as an adult saying goodbye to someone. Was a moment that was profound when it happened for me and has had a ripple effect. I mean, I know that might not sound quite as extraordinary as some of those life transition moments, but for me, it was a big deal. When I was growing up, my family moved around often. By the time I left my parents' house, we lived in, I think, 7 different places that I remember being in. Most of those moves while I was in grade school on up. And so I kind of, almost as a way of especially the couple of moves, the two moves, we're only in a place for about a year and a half. You get to a new school, you meet a bunch of people, you make friends, and then I ended up having to say goodbye to folks and then have to go through that again. That almost like a defense mechanism. I stopped, I like the grief, the hurt, the saying goodbye kind of just, pushed that down. I had this protective barrier in place. And so saying goodbye to people, I wouldn't let myself get sad. I wouldn't let myself cry. I wouldn't let myself mourn. It was odd because if I watched a movie about two people saying goodbye to each other and they might not ever see each other again, I would get teary-eyed over the movie where people were saying goodbye. But if it was me actually in the moment saying goodbye, I wouldn't tear up. I wouldn't feel anything. And the first time, and it was almost 4 years ago, someone dear to me, a friend that I had made, and I said goodbye, and I cried. It was incredible. It was just this release. It was something, it hit me. It was just, it kind of shook my world in that moment. I remember it like it was yesterday. Like, I had to, after the person left, I had to go put myself together. And I'm like, what on earth just happened to me? What just happened to me? Like it was out of the blue. Like it just was striking. It was an epiphany. But the ripple effect of that, the ability to connect with folks and to feel deeply towards those around me and to not have pent up grief when saying goodbye to folks. And I've had to say goodbye to some folks since then. The treasuring of connections with those around me. Staying in touch with people. Part of the thing of not being able to say goodbye or to mourn is I didn't stay connected to people in the past. That those relationships don't always necessarily have to end and be cut off, that you can maintain. It was a new thing for me. Powerful stuff. Bringing greater joy to life. Have you ever had something happen in your life where the full impact of that moment has a ripple effect? And sometimes we need time to process it, to fully know the gravity, the weight, the power of that moment. With Jesus' transfiguration, with Moses and Elijah there, Jesus' disciples, James, John, and Peter. It is an incredible experience. It blows their minds. To see Moses and Elijah there, to see them transfigured, to see them dazzling white, to hear the voice of God. It takes time for it to sink in. On one level, it may seem odd that when they came back down the mountain, they didn't talk about it. They didn't share this experience with any of the other disciples. Something wonderful happens, don't you just share it with everybody? I imagine them almost in a state of shock, just struggling to process all of it, to absorb it. But we know about it today because they wrote about it. They did talk about it. They didn't write about it. The story didn't get right down in the gospel until much later. But they eventually did talk about it after the resurrection. That they were able to put the pieces together. Oh, this moment of the transfiguration, this mountaintop experience, it foreshadowed, it prepared us to deal with the crucifixion of Jesus. That we wouldn't lose hope altogether. That we would be able to come to believe in His resurrection faster, because we had this experience to prime us for the resurrection. That this was proof that that moment sustained them in the hard road to the cross. What was it in that experience that required so much processing and sinking in, and that ripple effect? It's the words from God. Listen to Him. Listen to Him. When they get to the mountaintop, they're there to experience what is to happen. And what does Peter do? He says, "Hey, Lord, it's good that we're here. Let us build shelters for all of us to stay in." That's not what they're there to do. This is not a "what would you do" moment. This is a "what does Jesus do" moment. What does God do moment. And the voice from God when Moses and Elijah disappear and the cloud descends, the voice from God from the cloud is to listen to Him. It is a moment that they wrestle with through the rest of the gospel that has ripple effects. Listen to Him. We see that immediately because they come down the mountain, they get to a village, and they can't cast out the demon from the young man. And the father's like, comes to Jesus, my son is having these fits, he's possessed, your disciples can't cast out, I can't help, can you do anything? And Jesus expresses his frustration. And casts out the demon, rebukes the demon. The demon listens to Jesus, not the disciples. So 2 things to conclude on. Look at those moments in your life when you have encountered God. We spent this season of Advent doing God sightings. Look at those God sightings in your life. Savor those moments. Revisit them. And look for the ripple effects in your life of those God sightings, those moments when you've encountered God. When have you had your epiphanies? And if you're sitting there thinking, I'm not sure if I've had one of those moments, then I would encourage you to pray and ask God, God, show me when you've been there for me. Kind of like the foot poems. There's often times when we're walking along and we think we're all by ourselves, doing it by ourselves, when it's really God carrying us. And we don't realize it until we look in the rearview mirror and say, oh, wait. Right there when I thought I was alone, God was actually with me. Ask God to reveal those moments to you. And then look for the ripple effects. And then listen to those ripples and how God continues to love you and sustain you. This is important. It sustains us for the journey ahead. Especially in a world filled with so much turmoil and division and so much need for love. And then the last thing. As we listen and we look for those ripple effects, as we seek to be nourished by those ripple effects from those moments when we encounter God, those epiphany moments, mountaintop moments, God is with us. We hear Jesus' frustrations with his disciples that they're still not getting it. And yet, what does Jesus do? He still heals the young man. He still continues to travel with his disciples. They all continue to go to Jerusalem. Yeah, he's frustrated, but he continues to love them and sustain them and show his power. So too, God continues with us, to walk with us as we take time to look for the ripples of his love in our lives and to follow him. Amen.